The fluorescent lights in the courthouse hallway buzzed like angry wasps, casting harsh shadows across faces that didn't belong in the same room together. Tristan Walker stood with his shoulders squared, three small hands clutching his jacket, while across the polished floor, Vivienne Sterling smoothed her son's hair with trembling fingers. Between them, Judge Patricia Hendricks held a manila folder thick enough to contain an entire future. The bailiff cleared his throat, a sound that seemed to echo off the marble walls and settle somewhere deep in Tristan's chest. 6 months of carefully constructed normalcy had led to this moment, this impossible convergence of broken people trying to become whole. Harper squeezed her father's hand twice, their secret signal for when words weren't enough. Quinn pressed her face against his leg, hiding from the fluorescent glare. Blair, always the observer, watched Grayson with those knowing eyes that saw too much for 6 years old. The judge's mouth opened, forming words that would reshape everything when the world froze. Time suspended itself in that peculiar way it does before life-altering pronouncements, leaving everyone caught in amber, waiting for the hammer to fall. Then the image shattered like glass, fragmenting into darkness, and bold white letters burned across the void. 6 months earlier. The alarm clock's red numbers glowed 4:47 a.m. when Tristan's eyes opened. 13 minutes before the official start of another day, but sleep had become a luxury he couldn't afford. Not when 3 6-year-olds needed breakfast customized to their individual specifications, lunches packed with precisely cut sandwiches and clothes that matched well enough to avoid questions at school, but not so identical that teachers mixed them up again. He moved through the small kitchen of their craftsman bungalow with practiced efficiency, cracking eggs into 3 separate bowls. Harper liked hers scrambled dry. Quinn wanted them over easy with runny yolks she'd dip her toast into. Blair refused eggs entirely unless they were hidden in French toast with cinnamon sugar. The coffee maker gurgled to life, filling the pre-dawn quiet with the only sound that made these hours bearable. Through the kitchen window he could see Mrs. Patterson's porch light across the street, another early riser in a neighborhood of families who slept normal hours. Catherine would have laughed at him now, he thought. His wife had been chaos incarnate, beautiful disaster personified, the kind of woman who threw ingredients into pans without measuring and somehow produced perfection. She'd lived by intuition and impulse right up until the moment her heart decided to stop beating on a delivery table, leaving him with 3 identical daughters and no instruction manual. That was 6 years and 17 failed relationships ago. Not that he was counting. Harper appeared in the doorway, first, always the earliest, her blonde hair tangled from sleep, and her eyes already assessing the kitchen like a tiny general surveying a battlefield. She'd inherited Catherine's green eyes, but Tristan's worry, that constant low-level anxiety that the world might collapse at any moment. She climbed onto the counter stool without a word, watching him work. This was their routine, these quiet minutes before her sisters descended like twin tornadoes. The question came as he plated her eggs, precise and devastating in its simplicity. "Daddy, why don't we have a mommy like the other kids?" His hand stilled over the spatula. 6 years, and the question never got easier. He knelt down until they were eye level, this brave little girl who carried too much knowledge in her small frame. His voice came out steady despite the fault lines cracking through his chest. "Because Mommy is watching from heaven, and Daddy loves you 3 times more to make up for it." Harper's expression didn't change, processing this familiar answer with the resignation of someone who'd heard it before and found it insufficient. She didn't argue. She never did. But the acceptance in her eyes hurt worse than rebellion would have. Quinn burst through the doorway moments later, all motion and noise already narrating her dreams in that stream of consciousness way that made teachers suggest ADHD testing. Blair drifted in behind her, silent as smoke, and claimed her spot at the table with the watchful stillness that sometimes made Tristan wonder what she saw that the rest of them missed. The morning accelerated from there. Teeth brushed, hair wrestled into something presentable. The ongoing negotiation over whether matching outfits were cute or embarrassing, a debate that changed daily based on factors Tristan couldn't predict. They were halfway through this carefully choreographed chaos when his phone buzzed with a text from Bennett, his younger brother who worked in corporate law, and seemed to think that gave him authority over Tristan's personal life. The message was brief. "Trust me. Tonight 7 p.m. Marcello's Bistro. Come with the girls, I found someone." Tristan deleted it without responding. Bennett had found someone 3 times in the past year. Each introduction had ended with Tristan driving home alone while his daughters asked questions he couldn't answer about why Ms. Rachel or Ms. Jennifer or Miss Sarah had suddenly remembered urgent appointments. But Harper had seen the screen before it went dark. She set down her fork with the kind of deliberate precision that meant trouble. Her voice carried across the kitchen, "Is that about another date?" Quinn's head snapped up. Blair stopped eating entirely, those observant eyes fixed on Tristan's face. There was no point lying. They were 6, not stupid, and they'd survived 17 iterations of this particular disappointment. He nodded, already formulating the explanation, but Quinn beat him to it. She tilted her head, counting on fingers smudged with syrup. "This is attempt number 18, right, Daddy?" The number hung in the air like an accusation. 18. 17 failures plus one more inevitable disaster. Mathematical proof that some equations didn't have solutions. Tristan forced brightness into his tone. "Maybe this one will be different." Harper's response came flat, experienced. "They never are." And there it was. The truth his 6-year-old daughter had learned through brutal repetition. Women said children weren't a problem until they saw 3 identical girls who came as a package deal. Then suddenly there were emergencies, family obligations, realizations that they weren't ready for commitment. Tristan wanted to argue, to promise that this time would be different, but he'd made that promise 16 times before. Empty reassurance was worse than honest silence. They finished breakfast in quiet, punctuated only by Quinn's chatter about her friend Madison's new puppy. The drive to Riverside Elementary passed in familiar silence, 3 backpacks in the rear seats, 3 lunch boxes with names written in permanent marker because even teachers couldn't always tell them apart. The pickup line moved with agonizing slowness. Ahead, Tristan could see Sarah Mitchelson's minivan, probably filled with her 2 boys, and that air of effortless maternal competence that made him feel like an imposter. Behind him, Marcus Chen checked his phone while his daughter played some game on a tablet, the kind of casual single parenting that looked nothing like Tristan's constant crisis management. When they finally reached the drop-off zone, Harper turned before climbing out. She studied him with those 2 old eyes. "You don't have to go tonight. We'll be okay." Something in his chest cracked at the resignation in her voice. 6 years old and already protecting him from rejection, already learning to lower expectations, already building walls that would take decades to tear down. He caught her hand before she could escape. "Hey, we're a team. Remember? Whatever happens tonight, we face it together." She nodded, but the skepticism remained. Quinn and Blair piled out after her, a blur of backpacks and goodbyes, and then Tristan was alone in a car that smelled like strawberry shampoo and broken promises. The drive to his home office took 15 minutes through downtown Riverside, past the courthouse that would later play such a central role in his life, though he didn't know that yet. Past Marcello's Bistro, where his entire existence would pivot on a single evening. Past all the ordinary landmarks of a life that was about to become extraordinary. His office occupied the converted garage of the bungalow drafting table, positioned to catch northern light walls covered with architectural renderings for projects that paid just enough to cover private school tuition and not much else. Freelance work had seemed romantic when Catherine was alive, when her nursing salary covered the gaps. Now it felt like tightrope walking without a net. The morning passed in CAD software and client emails interrupted periodically by texts from Bennett. 11:23 a.m. "Did you get my message?" 12:47 p.m. "Tristan, this one is different, I promise." 2:15 p.m. "Her name is Vivienne. She's a financial executive, and she has a son with special needs. She gets the kid thing." That last message made Tristan pause. Special needs. The phrase carried weight, implied understanding. Suggested someone who knew that parenthood wasn't Instagram photos and matching outfits, but rather 3 a.m. panic attacks and IEP meetings, and learning to love in ways that broke you open. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, crafting and deleting responses. Finally he typed, What time again? Bennett's reply came instantly. 7 p.m. Marcello's. I already made the reservation. 6 people. 6. Because of course Bennett assumed Tristan would bring the girls. Because that was the test, wasn't it? The sorting mechanism that separated genuine interest from polite horror. The afternoon crawled. Tristan picked up the girls at 3:15, survived the chaos of homework and snacks, and Quinn's meltdown over a toy that Blair had allegedly hidden but definitely hadn't. By 5:30 he stood in front of his closet trying to remember the last time he'd dressed for anything other than parent-teacher conferences. The navy button-down looked presentable. The jeans weren't too worn. He caught his reflection in the mirror and saw a 38-year-old man who looked older. Exhaustion carved into the lines around his eyes, gray threading through dark hair earlier than genetics predicted. Catherine wouldn't recognize him now. The thought arrived unbidden and unwelcome. She'd known a different version, the architect who took risks and believed in possibilities. That man had died in a delivery room 6 years ago, replaced by this cautious stranger who measured everything twice and still got it wrong. The girls appeared in his doorway, dressed in matching pink dresses that Harper had insisted on despite her usual protests about coordination. They looked perfect and terrifying, 3 identical faces with Catherine's features and Tristan's anxiety. Quinn broke the silence. "Do we look okay?" The vulnerability in her voice destroyed him. 6 years old and already worried about making good impressions, already understanding that their presence would be evaluated and judged. He knelt down, pulling all 3 into an embrace that probably wrinkled the dresses but felt more important than pressed fabric. "You look beautiful, all 3 of you, and if anyone doesn't see that they're not worth our time—" Blair's small voice came muffled against his shoulder. "But you'll be sad if she doesn't like us." The observation was too accurate to deny. He pulled back enough to see their faces. His words came quiet but firm. "I'll be sad if she doesn't see how amazing you are. But that's not your fault. That's her missing out. Understand?" They nodded, but he could see the weight they carried. The accumulated burden of 17 rejections that weren't theirs to own, but somehow had become their inheritance anyway. The drive to Marcello's took 12 minutes. Tristan used every second to coach himself through the evening ahead. Low expectations, polite conversation, early exit if things went badly, protect the girls above all else. The restaurant occupied a converted brownstone in Riverside's historic district, the kind of place that attracted young professionals and date nights and families celebrating occasions important enough to warrant cloth napkins. Tristan had eaten here twice, both times for client dinners, both times acutely aware that the entree prices exceeded his daily food budget. He found parking half a block away, parallel parking the 10-year-old Subaru between a Tesla and a BMW, in a way that felt symbolic of his entire economic existence. Quinn grabbed his hand as they walked. "Daddy, my stomach feels funny." Harper translated from the other side. "She's nervous." Blair, as usual, said nothing, but her grip on his jacket suggested agreement. They stood outside the restaurant's entrance, golden light spilling through windows onto brick sidewalk, the sound of conversation and clinking glasses creating a soundtrack of normalcy that felt alien and hostile. Tristan took a breath that didn't quite fill his lungs. "Okay, team. Shoulders back, chins up. We're going to walk in there like we belong, and if she doesn't like us, that's her loss. Got it?" 3 voices in unison. "Got it." But their hands trembled in his. The hostess greeted them with practiced professionalism that didn't quite hide the flicker of surprise at seeing 3 identical children. She checked her tablet with manicured efficiency. Her smile stayed professional. "Party name?" Tristan's throat felt tight. "Walker. Bennett Walker made the reservation." Recognition sparked in her eyes. "Oh, yes. Your party is already here, right this way, right this." They wove through the dining room, past couples sharing wine and whispered intimacy, past families celebrating birthdays or anniversaries, past all the people whose lives looked simpler than existence felt. Every eye seemed to track their progress, judging, assessing, measuring 3 little girls against whatever standards strangers applied to children in fancy restaurants. The hostess stopped at a table near the window where a woman sat alone, and Tristan's first thought was that Bennett had undersold reality by a catastrophic margin. She rose as they approached, and he catalogued details with architectural precision. Tall, maybe 5'9" in heels that added 3 inches and suggested confidence. Dark auburn hair pulled back in a style that was professional without being severe. Charcoal suit that probably cost more than Tristan's monthly mortgage. Eyes that were blue or gray depending on the light, currently reflecting something that looked like carefully controlled panic. This was Vivienne Sterling, and she was so far out of his league that the evening felt like cosmic joke before it began. Her voice came smooth, cultured, with an edge that might have been nerves. "Tristan." He managed a nod, acutely aware of his off-the-rack shirt and discount jeans. "Vivienne, these are my daughters, Harper, Quinn, and Blair." The girls performed their usual trick of moving in perfect synchronization, 3 identical nods that made people uncomfortable because nature wasn't supposed to produce copies this precise. Vivienne's expression did something complicated, not quite horror, but definitely not comfort. She opened her mouth to speak when a small figure emerged from behind her chair. The boy was maybe 8, thin in that gangly pre-adolescent way with Vivienne's coloring, but features that suggested a different genetic contributor. He wore noise-canceling headphones around his neck and held a tablet close to his chest like a shield. Vivienne's hand moved to his shoulder with practiced gentleness. "This is my son Grayson. Gray, this is Mr. Walker and his daughters." The boy didn't look up, didn't acknowledge the introduction. His eyes stayed fixed on the tablet screen where Tristan could see some kind of mathematical puzzle arranged in precise geometric patterns. Quinn, bless her fearless heart, stepped forward. "Hi, Grayson. Do you like games? We like games. Do you want to play with us?" The reaction was immediate and devastating. Grayson's entire body went rigid, a gasp escaping his throat that sounded like drowning. His hands flew to his ears even though the headphones were already in place, and a sound emerged that wasn't quite a scream but carried the same urgency. Vivienne moved with the speed of long practice, kneeling beside him, her voice dropping to a tone that was almost musical. "It's okay, Gray. You're safe. Too loud, I know. Let's breathe together." She demonstrated exaggerated inhales and exhales while Grayson's breathing hitched and stuttered toward something resembling normalcy. The restaurant had gone quiet. Every table watching. Every diner making judgments about the woman who brought a disruptive child to a nice establishment, about the man with too many daughters, about children who couldn't behave in public. Harper pulled Quinn back, her face pale. Blair had already retreated behind Tristan's legs. The evening was collapsing before appetizers, exactly as he'd feared. Tristan knelt down, making himself small and unthreatening, drawing on instincts he didn't know he possessed. His voice came gentle, pitched low. "Grayson, can you hear me? I'm going to do something, and I want you to tell me if it's okay." The boy's eyes flickered toward him, brief contact before skittering away. Tristan pulled a pen from his pocket and reached for the paper napkin, moving slowly, telegraphing every motion. He began to draw simple geometric shapes at first, then connecting them into patterns, triangles becoming hexagons, squares forming tessellations, the kind of mathematical beauty that made sense when words didn't. Grayson's breathing slowed, his hands lowered from his ears. One finger extended, pointing at the napkin where Tristan had created a spiral of interlocking shapes. The boy's voice came quiet, almost inaudible. "Fibonacci." Tristan added another curve, extending the pattern. "That's right, the golden ratio, nature's favorite number." For the first time, Grayson looked directly at him, and Tristan saw recognition flash across features that carried the particular beauty of children who experienced the world through different filters. He kept his voice soft. "I'm guessing loud noises and too many questions aren't your favorite things." Grayson shook his head, still watching the napkin like it might contain answers to questions he hadn't learned to ask. Tristan continued drawing, creating a border of geometric precision. "That's okay. We don't have to talk if you don't want to, but if you'd like to sit down and maybe draw patterns together, that would be cool with me." He held out the pen, an offering. Grayson stared at it for what felt like hours, compressed into seconds, then took it with careful fingers and added a triangle to Tristan's design, completing a pattern that had been waiting for exactly that shape. Vivienne's face had gone through several emotional transformations, landing somewhere between gratitude and something that looked dangerously close to tears. She caught Tristan's eye over Grayson's head, mouthing words he could read clearly. "How did you know?" He wanted to explain about the summer he'd volunteered at a special needs camp during college, about the training he'd received in pattern recognition and sensory processing. But this wasn't the moment for credentials. Instead, he simply said, "I've worked with kids on the spectrum." The headphones were a pretty clear signal. The hostess appeared, professional mask back in place despite the disruption. "Would you like to be seated?" Vivienne looked at Tristan, a question in her expression that went beyond restaurant logistics. This was the decision point, the moment where he could make excuses and extract himself and his daughters from an evening that had already proven complicated. Harper stood beside him watching. Quinn had stopped her usual chatter. Blair observed everything with those knowing eyes. Tristan gestured to the table. "I think we'd all like to sit down, if that's okay with Grayson." The boy didn't answer verbally, but he moved toward a chair, still holding the napkin with its growing pattern of geometric precision. They arranged themselves around the table like chess pieces in an uncertain game. Tristan helped boost the girls into their seats while Vivienne settled Grayson with practiced efficiency, positioning his tablet where he could see it without blocking conversation. The waiter appeared young and nervous, probably wondering if this table would be more trouble than the tip justified. He started his rehearsed specials speech, but Tristan held up a hand. His request came easy, born from 17 previous attempts. "Could we get 4 chocolate milks to start 3? Regular one in a cup with a lid and a straw." The waiter blinked. "Chocolate milk." Quinn's voice rang out with the confidence of experience. "It's our tradition. If we're going to survive boring grown-up talk, we should at least get chocolate milk." Vivienne's expression did something unexpected. Her laugh came out surprised and genuine. "That's the best dating philosophy I've ever heard. Make it 5 chocolate milks. I'll join the revolution." The waiter scribbled notes and fled, leaving the 6 of them in a silence that felt less hostile than curious. Vivienne spoke first, her corporate polish showing cracks that made her more human. "I should apologize. Grayson doesn't always do well with new situations. Bennett told me about your daughters, but I probably should have mentioned that Gray has autism. High functioning, but still—" Tristan interrupted gently. "You don't have to explain or apologize. My girls can be overwhelming in their own way. 3 of them at once tends to freak people out." Harper's voice came quiet but pointed. 17 times to be exact." The number landed like a grenade in the middle of the table. Vivienne's eyes widened, understanding blooming across features that suggested she did math far more complex than relationship arithmetic. She studied the 3 girls with new attention. 17 people walked away because of you." Quinn nodded, matter of fact. "They always say kids are fine, then they see there's 3 of us and remember important meetings." Blair added her rare contribution, "Or their grandmother got sick, or their car broke down, or they're not ready for commitment." The cynicism in their voices belonged to people decades older. Vivienne's professional composure cracked further, something raw showing through. Her words came soft. "I've been on 23 first dates in 3 years. Every single one ended when they met Grayson." The admission hung between them, 2 strangers and 4 children, bound by the particular loneliness of being deemed too complicated for easy love. Tristan found himself speaking before caution could intervene. "So we're both damaged goods in the relationship market." Vivienne's smile carried more pain than humor. "Or we're exactly what the other needs." The chocolate milks arrived, saving them from examining that statement too closely. The waiter distributed them with visible relief at having a concrete task escaping before anyone could change their order or have another meltdown. Grayson accepted his cup with the lid, using the straw with careful precision. The girls attacked theirs with enthusiasm that left milk mustaches and satisfied sighs. Conversation started tentatively, 2 adults trying to find common ground while monitoring 4 children for signs of impending disaster. Vivienne asked about his work, and Tristan found himself explaining freelance architecture in ways that probably made it sound more romantic than the reality of invoice chasing and midnight deadlines. He countered with questions about her career in financial management, learning that she ran a division at Sterling Capital, the kind of company that managed portfolios in amounts he couldn't conceptualize. They were from different worlds that much became clear. But they were also from the same country of exile, the place where parents of complicated children lived in quiet desperation. Quinn eventually broke through the adult conversation. "Mr. Grayson, do you like tic-tac-toe?" She'd pulled crayons from the kids' activity pack the waiter had provided, drawing a grid on the paper placemat. Grayson studied it, then picked up a crayon and marked an X in the center square with the kind of strategic thinking that suggested he'd calculated every possible outcome. Harper and Blair joined in turning it into a tournament that involved elaborate rules only children could follow. Vivienne watched with an expression Tristan recognized from his own mirror, the desperate hope that maybe, possibly this time would be different. The food came. The waiter had wisely brought chicken fingers for all 4 children without being asked, understanding that kids' menus in fancy restaurants were largely decorative. Tristan found himself cutting Grayson's food into smaller pieces when the boy struggled with the knife, an instinctive action that made Vivienne's breath catch. She caught his eye across the table. "You're really good with him." Tristan shrugged, uncomfortable with praise. "I just see him, not his autism, him." Something shifted in Vivienne's expression. Walls coming down brick by careful brick. Her voice carried weight when she spoke again. "No one has ever said that to me before." They talked through dinner, conversation flowing easier as wine and chocolate milk lowered defenses. Tristan learned that Vivienne's ex-husband had left when Grayson's diagnosis came through, unable to handle a son who didn't meet his expectations. That she worked 70-hour weeks partly from ambition and partly from the guilt of not being home enough. That her mother thought she should institutionalize Grayson and try again with a normal child. In return, he offered his own history. Catherine's death, the overwhelming reality of single parenthood times 3, the slow realization that he'd become invisible to women who might have found him interesting before the girls came attached. The truth poured out easier than expected. "I've been rejected 17 times because apparently 3 kids crosses some invisible line from challenging to impossible, like there's an acceptable number of children and I exceed the limit." Vivienne's response came immediate and fierce. "Their loss. Your daughters are incredible." Harper had been listening because Harper always listened. She set down her fork with deliberate care. Her question cut through adult conversation. "Miss Vivienne, can we ask you something?" Vivienne nodded, wariness creeping into her features. Quinn took over as she usually did. "Do you give us permission to date Daddy?" Confusion flickered across Vivienne's face. "What?" Blair clarified with her usual precision. "Because if you date Daddy, we'll see you a lot, so we should approve first." Harper added the final piece. "We have veto power. It's only fair since we were here first." The adults froze. 4 children watched with varying expressions of seriousness. The restaurant noise faded into background static. Then Vivienne started laughing, real and unguarded and beautiful. Her voice shook with it. "I have never been asked for permission by the kids before. Usually they're the ones vetoing me." She looked at each girl in turn, giving them the attention their question deserved. "I would be honored to date your daddy, if you approve of me." 3 heads swiveled together in that unnerving, synchronized way, holding a silent conference that only siblings could conduct. Finally, Harper spoke for the collective. "We'll give you a trial period, but if you make Daddy sad, we're 6, but we're scary." Tristan wanted to crawl under the table and die of mortification, but Vivienne just extended her hand solemnly. "I accept your terms, and I promise to do my best." They shook on it, 3 small hands taking turns, with one adult one sealing a contract that felt more binding than any legal document. Grayson, who had been quietly eating and drawing patterns throughout this exchange, suddenly spoke. "I like them." Everyone turned. The boy had said maybe 10 words all evening, communicating primarily through nods and gestures. Now he looked directly at the triplets. His voice came clearer. "They don't ask me to be different. They just let me be." Vivienne's eyes filled with tears. She blinked away quickly. Her hand found Tristan's across the table, squeezing once before releasing. The waiter brought the check, which Tristan insisted on splitting despite Vivienne's protests. They argued about it with the kind of playful intensity that suggested they'd argued about bigger things someday. Outside, the November evening had turned cold, Riverside's downtown lights creating halos in the early darkness. Tristan's ancient Subaru sat half a block away, visibly shabby, next to the sleek luxury sedan Vivienne approached. She turned before unlocking her car, Grayson already climbing into the back seat with his tablet. "I'd like to do this again, all 6 of us." Hope and terror warred in Tristan's chest. "Even though I come with 3 tornadoes." Vivienne's smile carried hard-won understanding. "Even though I come with one who needs extra patience and care." Harper, Quinn, and Blair clustered around Tristan's legs, watching this exchange with the gravity of small judges determining fate. Quinn broke the tension with her usual directness. "So this is number 18. Are you going to be different from the others?" Vivienne knelt down, meeting 3 identical faces at eye level. "I'm going to try my absolute hardest, because I think you 3 are pretty amazing, and your dad is lucky to have you." She stood, directing her next words to Tristan. "My number. Call me. Please." She handed him a business card that probably cost more than his weekly grocery budget-heavy stock with embossed letters. Then she was gone, driving away in her expensive car with her complicated son, leaving Tristan and his daughters standing on a brick sidewalk, trying to process what had just happened. The girls piled into the Subaru, chattering about the evening with analysis that would put professional critics to shame. They debated Vivienne's sincerity, Grayson's patterns, whether chocolate milk should become a mandatory first-date tradition. Tristan drove on autopilot, his mind replaying moments. The way Vivienne had laughed at Quinn's philosophy, how she'd handled Grayson's meltdown with practiced grace, the understanding in her eyes when he'd talked about Catherine, the warmth of her hand across the table. They were almost home when Harper's voice came from the back seat, quiet and tentative. "Daddy, she was different, wasn't she?" He caught her eyes in the rearview mirror, seeing hope and fear in equal measure. "Yeah, sweetheart, I think she was." Quinn's enthusiasm erupted. "So number 18 is special. We should celebrate. Can we have ice cream?" Blair's practical voice cut through. "We just had chocolate milk and fancy dinner. Maybe tomorrow." They pulled into the driveway of their small bungalow home, looking shabby after Marcello's elegance, but familiar in ways that mattered more than aesthetics. Tristan helped the girls out, shepherding them through the evening routine of teeth brushing and pajamas and the ongoing negotiation over bedtime stories. Later, after they'd finally fallen asleep in their shared room, 3 beds pushed together because they still couldn't bear being separated, Tristan stood at his kitchen sink washing dishes and thinking about probability. 17 failures suggested a pattern. 17 rejections implied systemic issues rather than bad luck. But Vivienne had her own number 23. Together they'd survived 40 first dates that went nowhere. Maybe 41 was different. Maybe broken people could build something functional from their collected damage. His phone sat on the counter, Vivienne's business card propped against it. He picked up both thumb, hovering over the keypad. The text wrote itself, simple and honest. "Thank you for tonight. The girls haven't stopped talking about Grayson and pattern drawing. They're already planning what games to teach him next time. If you're willing, I'd like there to be a next time." He hit send before courage could fail. The response came faster than expected. "I'm willing, very willing. Grayson keeps asking when he can see the 3 nice girls again. Tomorrow too soon." Tristan's laugh surprised him, rusty from disuse. "Tomorrow is perfect." Tomorrow became the first domino in a chain reaction that would reshape 6 lives in ways none of them could predict. The Riverside Park playground sprawled across 3 acres of engineered safety surfaces and brightly colored equipment designed by committees who'd never met actual children. Tristan arrived 15 minutes early, watching from the parking lot as Vivienne's sedan pulled into the space beside his Subaru, the vehicles representing economic realities that should have made their connection impossible. Grayson emerged clutching his tablet like a talisman against unpredictability. The triplets spilled out of the Subaru with their usual chaos already racing toward the swings before Tristan could issue the standard warnings about stranger danger and staying within sight. Vivienne approached with the careful posture of someone navigating unfamiliar territory. Her weekend casual looked like it cost more than Tristan's monthly car payment, designer jeans and a cashmere sweater that probably required special cleaning. She smiled, uncertain. "I wasn't sure what to wear for a playground date." Tristan gestured at his own outfit, faded jeans and a flannel shirt that had survived 6 years of child-rearing. "You're overdressed, but we'll allow it." Grayson stood between them, eyes tracking the triplets' movement with the intense focus of someone cataloging data. Harper had claimed the highest swing, pumping her legs with determined precision. Quinn hung upside down from the monkey bars, defying physics and parental blood pressure. Blair sat in the sand beneath the climbing structure, arranging pebbles into geometric patterns that would have made mathematicians weep. The boy's voice came quiet. "They move a lot." Vivienne's hand found his shoulder. "That's okay. We can watch from here if you want." But Grayson took 3 steps forward, then 3 more, approaching the sandbox where Blair worked with the concentration of an artist. He lowered himself to the ground with careful precision, maintaining distance but clearly observing. Blair looked up, assessed him with those knowing eyes, then pushed half her pebble collection toward him without comment. An offering. An invitation coded in silence. Grayson arranged the pebbles into his own pattern, creating a mirror image of Blair's design. They worked in companionable quiet while their parents stood awkward and hopeful a few yards away. Vivienne's breath released like she'd been holding it for hours. "He never does this, approaches other kids on his own." Tristan watched his daughter share her space with practiced generosity. "Blair's good at reading people. She knows when to talk and when silence is better." They migrated to a bench that offered sight lines to all play areas, sitting with the careful distance of people still mapping boundaries. The October sun felt warm despite autumn's approach, creating shadows that lengthened across playground equipment designed to contain chaos. Vivienne spoke first. "I need to be honest about something my mother found out about last night." Tension crept into Tristan's shoulders. "And—" Her laugh carried no humor. "She ran a background check on you. Very thorough. Knows about Catherine, your financial situation, every traffic ticket you've had since 16. Anger flared hot in Tristan's chest. "That's invasive and controlling, I know." Vivienne's voice held exhaustion earned through years of similar battles. "Margaret Sterling doesn't do anything halfway, including meddling in my life." She turned to face him directly, sunlight catching auburn highlights in hair that probably required expensive maintenance. "She thinks you're after my money, that a struggling architect with 3 kids sees me as a meal ticket." The accusation landed like a physical blow. Tristan stood, needing movement to contain fury. "I should go. This was a mistake." Her hand caught his wrist grip, surprisingly strong. "Sit down. I'm not finished." He remained standing, muscles coiled for flight. Vivienne's words came measured and precise. "I told her she was wrong, that you split the check last night, even though I could see it hurt your budget, that you looked horrified when I mentioned my job title, that if you were a gold digger, you're the worst one in history." Some of the tension bled out of Tristan's frame. But she's Margaret Sterling. She doesn't accept being wrong." Vivienne's expression hardened with the particular frustration of adult children still trapped in parental expectations. "She wants to meet you. Soon. And she'll try to buy you off or scare you away or otherwise torpedo this before it becomes real." Tristan reclaimed his seat on the bench, processing implications. "Maybe I should let her. Save everyone the trouble. Or maybe you could fight for something worth having." Vivienne's challenge hung in the space between them. "Unless 17 rejections taught you to run at the first obstacle." The words stung because they contained truth. Tristan had learned to protect himself and his daughters by lowering expectations, by accepting that some doors stayed closed, by not investing in futures that couldn't materialize. His response came quiet. "I don't run, but I also don't drag my kids through battles they can't win." "Who says they can't win?" Vivienne gestured toward the playground where all 4 children now clustered around the slide, Grayson explaining something about angles and velocity, while the triplets listened with surprising attention. "Look at them. They've already decided we're worth it." The observation struck deep. Harper had never warmed to anyone this quickly. Quinn's usual hyperactivity had modulated into genuine interest. Blair, who guarded her trust like dragon's gold, had shared her pebbles, and Grayson was talking. Actual sentences, unprompted. Tristan's resolve wavered. "What exactly are you proposing? That we try, really try?" Vivienne's voice carried determination that probably served her well in boardrooms. "Not just date casually and hope it works. Actually fight for this. Weather my mother's interference. Navigate our complicated kids. Face whatever obstacles come up." She paused, vulnerability breaking through executive confidence. "Because I'm tired of being alone. Tired of men who see Grayson as a problem to solve or an inconvenience to tolerate. Tired of pretending I don't want partnership just because it's difficult to find." Tristan understood that exhaustion intimately. 6 years of single parenting had worn grooves into his soul, places where hope used to live before repetition eroded it away. He watched Quinn teach Grayson how to go down the slide backwards, both children laughing as gravity and friction created unexpected speed. "Okay, we try, but if your mother comes after me with lawyers or private investigators or whatever weapons rich people use, I'm out. I won't put my daughters through that." "Deal." Vivienne extended her hand, formal as a contract signing. They shook and something shifted in the air between them, commitment replacing casual interest. The next 6 weeks unfolded like time-lapse photography moments, compressing and expanding based on their emotional weight. They met at Parks Museums, the Children's Science Center, where Grayson spent 2 hours in the physics section, while the triplets built elaborate marble runs. They coordinated schedules with the precision of military campaigns, working around Tristan's client deadlines and Vivienne's board meetings and 4 different school pickup times. Slowly, carefully, they built something that resembled a relationship. Tristan learned that Vivienne drank her coffee black with 2 sugars, that she cried during animated movies, but stayed stoic through horror films, that she'd once wanted to be a pianist before pragmatism steered her toward finance. She discovered his habit of sketching buildings on napkins, his tendency to quote obscure poetry, the way he still slept on one side of the bed despite 6 years of sleeping alone. The children bonded faster than their parents dared. Harper appointed herself Grayson's social interpreter, explaining unwritten rules of playground politics with the authority of someone who'd spent years navigating them. Quinn became his defender, ready to fight anyone who looked at him wrong. Blair remained his quiet companion, 2 observers who understood that silence could be its own language. For 47 days, it felt like maybe broken people could build functional families from collected wreckage. Then Preston Hall returned from whatever hell he'd been haunting, and everything fractured. Tristan was at Vivienne's penthouse apartment when the intercom buzzed, rare Friday evening when both had managed to align schedules. The space occupied the top floor of Riverside's newest luxury building, floor-to-ceiling windows, offering views of downtown that probably cost more per square foot than Tristan's entire mortgage. The children sprawled across the living room floor, constructing an elaborate city from Lego bricks that combined Grayson's architectural precision with the triplets' chaotic creativity. Harper directed traffic like a tiny general. Quinn provided sound effects. Blair and Grayson worked in focused silence, building structures that defied normal engineering. Vivienne stood in her kitchen preparing dinner, actual cooking, rather than takeout, attempting a pasta dish with the concentration of someone following instructions in a foreign language. Tristan helped by staying out of the way and opening wine. The doorman's voice crackled through the speaker. "Ms. Sterling, there's a Preston Hall here to see you. Should I send him up?" Every muscle in Vivienne's body went rigid. The wooden spoon clattered against the pot's edge, sauce splattering across granite countertops. Her voice came tight. "No. Tell him I'm not available." Static then. "He says it's about Grayson. Legal matter that can't wait." Tristan watched color drain from Vivienne's face, professional composure cracking to reveal naked fear underneath. "Send him up." She moved to the children with forced calm. "Gray, honey, Why don't you and the girls take your Lego city into your room? I need to talk to a grown-up for a minute. Grayson looked up, pattern recognition flashing across features that missed nothing. Is it Dad Preston? The hyphenated name carried weight distance coded into grammar. Not father, not dad. The man who'd contributed DNA and then disappeared when chromosomes didn't align with expectations. Vivienne knelt beside her son. Yes, but it's just boring adult stuff. You don't have to see him if you don't want to. Relief flooded the boy's expression. I don't want to. Harper gathered her sisters with efficient authority, herding everyone toward Grayson's bedroom with the protectiveness of someone who recognized threat even when adults tried to hide it. The elevator chimed. Footsteps approached in the hallway. Then Preston Hall entered Vivienne's apartment like he still belonged there. Expensive suit and confident stride and smile that didn't reach calculating eyes. He was objectively handsome in that generic way certain men achieved through money and genetics, tall and fit and perfectly groomed. The kind of person who photographed well and left nothing memorable behind. His gaze swept the apartment, cataloging the pasta sauce, the wine glasses, Tristan standing in the kitchen like an intruder in someone else's life. Vivienne, I see you're entertaining. Her voice could have cut glass. What do you want, Preston? He pulled papers from his briefcase with theatrical precision, setting them on the marble counter between them. I want to discuss custody arrangements for Grayson. The words hung in air, gone suddenly hostile. Tristan felt like he should leave, give them privacy for whatever family drama this represented, but Vivienne's hand found his wrist in silent plea for him to stay. She stared at the documents without touching them. You abandoned him 3 years ago. You don't get to suddenly decide you want custody. Preston's expression arranged itself into something approximating concern. I made mistakes. I was young, scared, unprepared for a special needs child. But I've grown, changed. I want to be part of my son's life. Your son doesn't even remember you. Vivienne's anger built like pressure behind a dam. You missed 3 years of meltdowns and therapy and IEP meetings and late-night panics. You don't get to waltz back in now that he's manageable. Preston gestured at the papers with manicured fingers. That's for the court to decide. I've filed for joint custody. Maybe more depending on what my lawyers find regarding your current lifestyle choices. His gaze slid to Tristan with barely concealed contempt. Dating a man with 3 children. Exposing Grayson to unstable family situations. The court might have questions about your judgment. Rage ignited in Tristan's chest, white-hot and dangerous. His voice came low. You should leave. Now. Preston's smile widened. Or what you'll do something stupid that proves you're exactly the kind of man who shouldn't be around my son. Vivienne stepped between them, hand on Tristan's chest. Don't. That's what he wants. She turned to Preston with the cold precision Tristan imagined she used in hostile board meetings. Get out. Any further communication goes through my attorney. Preston collected his papers with leisurely calm. I'll be in touch. Oh, and Vivienne. Your mother sends her regards. We had lunch yesterday. Fascinating conversation about what's best for Grayson. The revelation landed like a bomb. Margaret Sterling had aligned with her daughter's ex-husband. The implications made Tristan's head spin. Preston let himself out, confident footsteps retreating toward the elevator. The apartment fell into silence, broken only by pasta sauce bubbling forgotten on the stove. Vivienne moved mechanically to turn off the burner hands, shaking so badly she nearly burned herself. Tristan guided her to the couch, where she collapsed like strings had been cut. Her voice came hollow. He's right. About the court having questions. I'm a single mother working 70 hours a week, now dating someone with his own complicated family situation. A good lawyer could make me look unstable. Tristan sat beside her, rage giving way to the cold calculation of someone who'd navigated enough bureaucracy to understand how systems failed people. He doesn't actually want Grayson. This is about something else. My trust fund. Vivienne's laugh carried bitter understanding. When my father died, he left everything in trust. I get annual disbursements, but if I remarry, my new husband gets access to the principal. Preston's company is failing. He needs money. The pieces assembled into ugly coherence. So he files for custody to pressure you. Either you give him money to go away, or you stay single so he has a path back into your life and finances. And my mother is helping him because she thinks you're after the same thing. Vivienne's professional mask had shattered completely, leaving someone who looked terrifyingly young and lost. She'd rather I get back together with Preston than risk my money on someone she hasn't vetted. Tristan should have felt angry at the implication he was a gold digger. Instead, he felt something more dangerous: determination to prove Margaret Sterling wrong. He turned Vivienne to face him, hands on her shoulders. We need to pause this, us, until the custody issue is resolved. Pain flashed across her features. You're leaving. I'm protecting you. Tristan's words came measured despite the tearing sensation in his chest. Preston is right about one thing. Our relationship makes you look impulsive, gives his lawyers ammunition. If you're single, focused on Grayson, no distractions, you're harder to attack. Vivienne pulled away, standing to pace. So his manipulation works. He threatens custody, and I have to choose between my son and any chance at partnership. You're not choosing. You're being strategic. Tristan stood too, needing her to understand. This isn't forever, just until the court rules. Her voice broke. And if the court process takes months, a year, I'm supposed to put my life on hold because my ex-husband decided to weaponize our son. The children's door opened. Grayson emerged, face-pale, tablet clutched to his chest. Harper, Quinn, and Blair followed like protective shadows. The boy's voice came small. I heard. Dad Preston wants me to live with him. Vivienne crossed the room in 3 strides, kneeling before her son. That's not going to happen. I promise. Grayson's next words destroyed what remained of Vivienne's composure. But if you have to choose between me and Tristan, you pick me, right? The question hung in air, thick with impossible choices. Vivienne gathered her son close, tears finally breaking through. Always you, baby. Always. Over Grayson's shoulder, her eyes found Tristan's, and he saw the future fracturing in real time. Harper stepped forward, her small voice carrying authority beyond her years. This is our fault. If Daddy didn't have us, Miss Vivienne wouldn't look unstable. The logic was childish and heartbreaking, and contained enough truth to make Tristan's throat close. Quinn's usual brightness had dimmed. We ruin everything. Blair said nothing, but her eyes held the weight of 3 children who'd learned too young that their existence complicated other people's happiness. Tristan gathered his daughters close, building a wall of arms around them. This is absolutely not your fault. Do you hear me? None of this is because of you. But the damage had been done. 6 weeks of careful construction demolished by one man's greed and one grandmother's interference. The evening limped toward a conclusion nobody wanted. Vivienne insisted they eat dinner despite no one having appetite. The children pushed pasta around plates while adults made hollow conversation. Grayson had retreated into nonverbal communication, responding only in nods and headshakes. Tristan left early, making excuses about morning client meetings. The triplets said subdued goodbyes to Grayson, promises to play again soon. That felt like lies, even as they were spoken. In the Subaru driving home, Quinn broke the silence. Are we going to see them again? Tristan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I don't know, sweetheart. Harper's voice came from the back seat, old beyond her years. Number 18 was too good to be true anyway. The resignation in her tone carved pieces from Tristan's heart. 6 years old, and already learning that hope was a luxury their family couldn't afford. That night, after the girls finally slept, Tristan sat at his kitchen table staring at his phone. Vivienne had texted twice. First message, I'm sorry about tonight, about all of this. Second message, my lawyer says you're right. I need to look stable and focused. No distractions. I hate that this is happening. He typed and deleted responses, each attempt feeling inadequate. Finally settled on, focus on Grayson. That's what matters. Everything else can wait. Her reply came after long minutes. Can it, though? Or is this just another way we're teaching our kids that wanting connection makes you vulnerable? Tristan had no answer to that. The next 2 weeks passed in a fog of carefully maintained distance. Vivienne sent occasional updates about the legal proceedings. Preston had filed for joint custody with an eye toward full custody if the court found Vivienne's lifestyle unsuitable. Margaret Sterling had provided a deposition supporting her ex-son-in-law's claims that Vivienne worked too much and made impulsive romantic decisions. The triplets asked about Grayson daily. Tristan offered vague reassurances while dying inside. Then Bennett called with information that changed everything. Tristan's brother appeared at the bungalow unannounced on a Wednesday evening, still wearing his corporate lawyer uniform of expensive suit and power tie. He waited until the girls were occupied with homework before spreading documents across the kitchen table. Bennett's voice carried the satisfaction of someone who'd found the smoking gun. Preston Hall is bankrupt, not just his company. Him personally, leveraged his assets on bad investments, then tried to cover losses with worse decisions. Tristan scanned the financial statements, numbers bleeding red across every page. "How did you get these?" "I have friends in places Preston should have been more careful about." Bennett tapped a highlighted section. "More importantly, look at the timeline. He filed for custody 3 days after his final appeal for a business loan was rejected. This isn't about Grayson, it's about Vivienne's trust fund." Understanding crystallized. He needs her to remarry someone he can control, or pay him off to go away. Exactly. Bennett pulled up another document, legal filing with official seals. But here's the beautiful part. If we can prove the custody suit is financially motivated rather than genuine parental interest, the court will dismiss it, and potentially sanction him for abuse of process. Hope flickered in Tristan's chest, dangerous and fragile. "How do we prove it?" Bennett's smile turned predatory. "We connect the dots, show the court his financial desperation, his sudden interest in custody only after money dried up, his collaboration with Margaret Sterling, who has her own financial motivations for keeping Vivienne single." He met Tristan's eyes directly. "But we need Vivienne to fight, and she needs to demonstrate stability. That means showing the court she's built a support system, a partner who isn't after her money, someone with his own life, his own responsibilities, who provides emotional support rather than financial dependency." The implication hung unspoken. Tristan needed to step back into Vivienne's life, publicly giving Preston ammunition while simultaneously proving the relationship wasn't about money. Risk and reward balanced on a knife's edge. Tristan's phone sat on the table, silent accusation of 2 weeks without real communication. His fingers hovered over the contact labeled, "Vivienne Sterling, do not call during work hours." He called anyway. She answered on the second ring, voice professional with an edge of hope. "Tristan." Words tumbled out before courage could fail. "I have information about Preston. Financial records proving his custody suit is motivated by bankruptcy, not paternal concern. My brother thinks we can get it dismissed if we play this right." Silence stretched across the connection long enough that Tristan wondered if he'd miscalculated. Then Vivienne's voice came fierce and determined. "What do we need to do?" Bennett coached them through strategy like a general planning invasion. They needed to document their relationship as stable and supportive, needed character witnesses who could testify to Tristan's integrity and Vivienne's parenting, needed to show the court that two complicated families could create something functional together. Most importantly, they needed to stop hiding. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for the following week. Bennett filed motions as Vivienne's attorney, presenting Preston's financial records and requesting the custody suit be dismissed as bad faith litigation. Preston's lawyers countered with evidence of Vivienne's demanding work schedule and questionable romantic choices. The judge ordered both parties to appear with any relevant witnesses. Tristan stood in his bedroom the morning of the hearing, staring at the single suit he owned, purchased for Catherine's funeral and worn only for parent-teacher conferences since. The jacket still smelled faintly of mothballs despite 3 days hanging in fresh air. The triplets appeared in his doorway, dressed in matching navy dresses that Vivienne had bought them for exactly this purpose. They looked like tiny lawyers, serious and determined. Harper held out his tie. "We're ready, Daddy." Quinn added, "We practiced our testimony with Miss Vivienne. We know what to say." Blair's contribution came quiet but firm. "We're going to help." Pride and terror warred in Tristan's chest. His 6-year-old daughters were about to testify in family court because adults had failed to resolve their problems like functional humans. They drove to the courthouse in silence, heavy with anticipation. The building loomed gray and imposing justice carved into stone above doors that had witnessed countless family fractures. Inside, Bennett met them with last-minute coaching. Vivienne waited near the courtroom entrance, Grayson beside her wearing headphones and clutching his tablet like a shield. She'd dressed in conservative corporate armor, hair pulled back, minimal makeup, every inch the competent professional mother. Their eyes met across the hallway, and something passed between them. Acknowledgement of risk. Commitment to fight. Understanding that the next few hours would determine whether 6 people could become a family or remain forever fragmented. Preston arrived with his own lawyer, expensive suit, and false concern, arranged carefully for judicial consumption. Behind him, Margaret Sterling made her entrance, silver hair and pearls, and the particular authority of old money. She spared Tristan a single dismissive glance before focusing on her daughter Vivienne. "I hope you've reconsidered this foolishness." Vivienne's spine straightened. "The only foolishness is you siding with a man who abandoned his son for 3 years. Margaret's expression didn't shift. "I'm siding with financial stability and appropriate social connections, something you've demonstrated poor judgment about." The bailiff called them into the courtroom before Vivienne could respond. They filed in like opposing armies, taking seats on opposite sides of an aisle that represented more than physical distance. Judge Patricia Hendricks presided, a woman in her 60s with gray hair and eyes that suggested she'd seen every manipulation family law could produce. She reviewed the filings with methodical precision before addressing the room. Her voice carried authority earned through decades on the bench. "We're here regarding Mr. Hall's petition for custody modification of the minor child Grayson Hall. Mr. Hall, your attorney, may present opening arguments." What followed was a masterclass in character assassination disguised as parental concern. Preston's lawyer painted Vivienne as a workaholic who prioritized career over motherhood, who made impulsive romantic decisions, who exposed her vulnerable son to unstable family situations. They called witnesses. Vivienne's former nanny, who testified about the long hours, a work colleague who mentioned Vivienne's weekend emails, Margaret Sterling herself, who delivered devastating testimony about her daughter's poor judgment in choosing romantic partners. Through it all, Vivienne sat, rigid professional mask firmly in place, while Grayson leaned against her side and Tristan ached with helpless fury. Then Bennett stood to present their defense, and the tide began to turn. He called Grayson's therapist first, who testified that the boy had shown remarkable progress in recent months. More verbal communication, better social integration, reduced anxiety in new situations. The therapist's voice carried professional assessment. "Grayson has mentioned repeatedly that he enjoys spending time with 3 girls who accept him without trying to change him. This positive peer interaction has been instrumental in his development." Bennett introduced Preston's financial records, laying bare the bankruptcy and desperation. Showed the timeline correlation between financial collapse and sudden parental interest. Built a case that this custody suit was economic manipulation rather than genuine concern. Then he called Harper Walker to the stand. The courtroom went quiet as a 6-year-old girl climbed into the witness box, feet dangling above the floor, blonde hair catching fluorescent light. Judge Hendricks spoke gently. "Harper, do you understand that you need to tell the truth today?" Harper's voice came clear and steady. "Yes, ma'am. Daddy says lying is for people too weak to face reality." A ripple of surprised laughter ran through the courtroom. The judge's expression softened. "Your daddy sounds wise. Now can you tell me about Grayson?" What followed was testimony that carved pieces from every adult heart in the room. Harper described meeting Grayson at the restaurant, how he'd been scared and overwhelmed, how Tristan had drawn patterns with him when other adults would have been annoyed, how over weeks and months Grayson had become their friend. Her words held simple truth. "He's different than other kids, but different doesn't mean bad. Different means he sees patterns we don't see and knows things we don't know. And when people are mean to him because he's different, it makes us mad because we're different too. Bennett's question came soft. How are you different? We're three. Harper's matter-of-fact tone suggested this should be obvious. People say that's too many, too loud, too much. They look at Daddy like he did something wrong by having us. But Grayson doesn't care that there's three of us. He just likes us. She turned to look directly at Judge Hendricks. Miss Vivienne doesn't care that there's three of us either. She makes 4 chocolate milks and cuts everyone's food and remembers which of us likes which things. She's nice to Daddy and nice to us and really nice to Grayson even when he has hard days. The judge's expression remained professionally neutral, but something shifted in her eyes. And Mr. Hall, Grayson's father, Harper's voice went flat. Grayson calls him Dad Preston, with a dash, like he's not really a dad, just someone named Preston who happens to be related. Preston's lawyer objected, claiming the testimony was hearsay and prejudicial. Judge Hendricks overruled, allowing Harper to continue. The child's final statement landed like a verdict. If you make Grayson live with Dad Preston, he'll be sad. And if Miss Vivienne loses Grayson, she'll be sad like Daddy was when our mommy died. We don't want anyone else to be that sad. She climbed down from the witness box, returning to her seat beside Tristan, who gathered her close while fighting tears. Judge Hendricks called a brief recess. The courtroom emptied into hallways where people clustered in anxious groups. Tristan found Vivienne near the water fountain, her composure finally cracking. She grabbed his hand. I can't lose him. I can't. Tristan pulled her close public display of affection that Preston's lawyer probably photographed for evidence. You won't. Harper just eviscerated their entire case. When court resumed, Judge Hendricks delivered her preliminary ruling with the weight of someone who'd seen this pattern too many times. Her voice filled the courtroom. I'm going to be frank. This custody petition strikes me as financially motivated rather than based in genuine parental concern. Mr. Hall, your 3-year absence from your son's life is troubling. Your sudden interest coinciding with financial difficulties is more troubling. Preston started to speak, but his lawyer silenced him with a hand. The judge continued, However, I am concerned about stability for Grayson. Ms. Sterling, your work hours are excessive. Your recent romantic relationship, while it appears genuine, is also quite new. She paused, letting tension build. Therefore, I'm ordering a 30-day evaluation period. Family Services will conduct home visits, interview teachers and therapists, and assess Grayson's well-being in his current situation. At the end of 30 days, we'll reconvene. Relief and anxiety warred in Vivienne's expression. Not victory, but not defeat. 30 days to prove she could provide stable environment while fighting off her ex-husband and manipulative mother. The judge's final words carried warning. Ms. Sterling, I suggest you use this time to demonstrate that you can maintain appropriate work-life balance and make sound decisions regarding your son's welfare. Mr. Hall, I suggest you examine your motivations for pursuing custody and whether they truly serve your son's best interests. Court adjourned. People filed out in subdued clusters. Bennett looked pleased with the outcome, explaining that 30 days was far better than immediate custody change. Tristan found Vivienne outside the courtroom, Grayson pressed against her side. The boy looked exhausted, overwhelmed by noise and emotion and adult complications he shouldn't have to navigate. Her voice came hollow. 30 days to prove I'm not a terrible mother. 30 days of strangers in my home evaluating everything I do. Tristan wanted to promise it would be okay, but empty reassurance felt like betrayal. We'll get through it, all of us. She looked at him, vulnerability breaking through professional armor. The judge was right about one thing. Our relationship is new, untested. Maybe Preston's lawyers have a point about me making impulsive decisions. The doubt in her voice sparked something fierce in Tristan's chest. He'd spent 6 years being careful, protecting himself and his daughters from disappointment. But careful didn't build families. Careful didn't fight for people worth having. His next words came without calculation or safety net. Marry me. Vivienne's eyes went wide. What? Marry me. Tristan's voice strengthened with certainty he hadn't felt in years. Not eventually. Not after the court case. Now. This week. Give the evaluators something concrete to assess rather than speculation about stability. Her laugh came shocked and slightly hysterical. That's insane. We've known each other 2 months. Closer to 3. He caught her hands, grounding himself in physical contact. And I've learned more about you in 3 months than I learned about some people in years. I know you cry during Pixar movies. I know you alphabetize your spice rack. I know you'd burn down the world for Grayson. Grayson was listening, Harper and Quinn and Blair, clustering close, all 4 children watching this moment unfold. Tristan continued, words pouring out like water through cracked dam. I also know I've been rejected 17 times because women couldn't handle 3 kids. And you've survived 23 first dates with men who couldn't handle 1. We're both damaged and complicated and come with more baggage than anyone should reasonably want. He dropped to one knee right there in the courthouse hallway, ignoring stares from passing strangers. But maybe damaged people can build something functional from their collected wreckage. Maybe 3 kids and 1 kid equals a family instead of an impossible equation. Tears streamed down Vivienne's face. This is the worst proposal in history. We're in a courthouse. I just got threatened with losing custody. Your reasoning is basically that we're both disasters. The best disasters I know. Tristan smiled through his own tears. So what do you say? Want to be disasters together? Vivienne looked at Grayson's silent question in her expression. The boy studied Tristan with those analytical eyes that missed nothing. Grayson's voice came clear. He makes you happy. You make him happy. The math works. That simple assessment, delivered with the logic of someone who understood equations better than emotion, shattered what remained of Vivienne's resistance. She pulled Tristan to his feet. Yes. Absolutely insane, yes. They kissed in a courthouse hallway while 4 children cheered and Bennett laughed, and Margaret Sterling watched with an expression that promised this wasn't over. But for one moment none of that mattered. Just 2 broken people choosing to be broken together, believing that collective damage might somehow equal strength. They got married on a Thursday afternoon at the Riverside County Courthouse, the same building where they'd fought for Grayson 3 days earlier. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, especially Bennett, who served as witness and best man, and occasionally questioned his brother's sanity in equal measure. Judge Patricia Hendricks performed the ceremony, having agreed to officiate after reviewing their circumstances with what might have been sympathy or might have been dark amusement at the chaos of human relationships. She wore her black robes and her expression of professional neutrality, but something softened around her eyes when the children filed in. Harper, Quinn, and Blair wore the navy dresses from the hearing, having declared them their official court uniforms. Grayson clutched a small velvet box containing the rings Tristan had purchased that morning from a jeweler who specialized in quick turnarounds and payment plans. No flowers, no music, no guests beyond Bennett and the 4 children who'd somehow become the architects of this improbable union. Vivienne had chosen a simple cream dress from her closet, conservative enough for judicial approval, but fitted in ways that made Tristan forget how to breathe properly. Her hair fell loose around her shoulders, concession to romance in a ceremony defined by pragmatism. Judge Hendricks cleared her throat. We're gathered here for the legal union of Tristan James Walker and Vivienne Margaret Sterling. This is a civil ceremony, brief and binding. If anyone has legal objection to this marriage, speak now. Silence filled the small chamber. Tristan half expected Margaret Sterling to burst through the doors with lawyers and injunctions, but the moment passed without intervention. The judge continued with perfunctory efficiency through legal requirements and state obligations. Then she reached the part where vows became binding, where words transformed casual connection into legal entanglement. Her voice carried weight. Mr. Walker, do you take Ms. Sterling to be your lawfully wedded wife in good times and bad, in sickness and health, for as long as you both shall live? Tristan looked at Vivienne, this woman he'd known for barely 3 months, whose life he was about to legally merge with his own. Madness dressed up as strategy. Except when he looked at her, it didn't feel like strategy at all. His voice came steady. I do. Judge Hendricks turned to Vivienne. Ms. Sterling, do you take Mr. Walker to be your lawfully wedded husband in good times and bad, in sickness and health, for as long as you both shall live." Vivienne's eyes held his blue-gray depths containing fear and hope and determination. "I do." Grayson stepped forward with the rings moving with careful precision. The bands were simple gold, affordable but solid, purchased with money Tristan had scraped from his emergency fund. They slid onto fingers with surprising ease, metal warming against skin. Judge Hendricks pronounced them married with the same authority she'd used to order custody evaluations. Bennett clapped. The triplets cheered. Grayson watched with analytical interest, probably calculating the statistical probability of this union's success. The kiss was brief, conscious of audience and location. But Vivienne's lips trembled against Tristan's, and he tasted salt that might have been tears, or might have been the residue of hope finally permitted to exist. They signed paperwork in triplicate. Marriage license. Name change forms for Vivienne, who'd chosen to keep Sterling professionally but add Walker legally. Documentation that would be filed with the state and become permanent record of this impulsive decision. Bennett drove them to Vivienne's penthouse afterward, the Subaru following the Mercedes in a parade that represented their economic disparity made manifest. The plan was simple. Tristan and the girls would move into Vivienne's apartment temporarily, presenting a unified household for the family services evaluation that would begin tomorrow. The logistics had been worked out in frantic phone calls over the past 72 hours. Vivienne had a spare bedroom that could accommodate 3 twin beds. Tristan's bungalow would be rented out to cover his mortgage. Grayson had agreed to share space with what he called the 3 nice girls, after extensive preparation and visual schedules. Nothing about this was conventional. Everything about it was necessary. They gathered in the penthouse living room that evening, 6 people trying to figure out how to become a family through sheer force of will. Vivienne ordered pizza because neither of them had mental energy for cooking. The children sprawled across expensive carpet, already negotiating the rules of cohabitation with the seriousness of diplomats drawing borders. Harper established herself as chief mediator. "Okay, so Grayson needs quiet time from 7 to 7:30 every evening. That's non-negotiable." Quinn nodded. "And we need to ask before touching his stuff because he likes things in specific places." Blair added, "But Grayson promised to teach us binary code if we teach him card games." Grayson's contribution came measured. "Also, no one uses my bathroom without asking. It's organized by frequency of use, and disrupting the system causes stress." They hammered out agreements with the practicality of children who understood that adaptation was survival. The adults watched simultaneously, proud and heartbroken that 6-year-olds and an 8-year-old were better at this than the supposedly mature humans in the room. Tristan's phone buzzed. Text from his landlord confirming the rental agreement. Then another from Bennett with a list of documents the family services evaluator would want to review. Then one from an unknown number that made his blood run cold. The message was brief. "Congratulations on your marriage. I hope it was worth it. Margaret." He showed Vivienne, who went pale beneath her careful composure. "She knows. Of course she knows. Probably had someone watching the courthouse." Bennett had warned them this would accelerate Margaret's interference. A hasty marriage would look desperate to hostile observers, provide ammunition for anyone arguing that Vivienne made impulsive decisions that endangered her son. But Tristan also knew waiting would have been worse. The evaluation period demanded stability, and nothing said stable like legal commitment. His voice came quiet. "We knew she'd fight this." Vivienne's laugh held no humor. "Knowing and experiencing are different things. My mother doesn't lose gracefully." She was proven right the next morning when the doorbell rang at 6:47 a.m., before coffee had finished brewing or children had been wrestled into school clothes. Margaret Sterling stood in the hallway dressed in Chanel and carrying the particular authority of someone who'd never been denied entry to anywhere. Behind her, 2 men in dark suits radiated the competence of professional muscle disguised as assistants. Her voice could have frozen nitrogen. "I need to speak with my daughter. Alone." Vivienne blocked the doorway. "Anything you have to say can be said in front of my husband." The word husband landed with deliberate emphasis. Margaret's expression didn't shift, but something flickered in her eyes that might have been rage or might have been grudging respect for the tactical maneuver. She brushed past Vivienne without waiting for invitation heels clicking across marble floors. The security detail remained in the hallway, which felt ominous rather than reassuring. Margaret surveyed the apartment with the assessment of someone cataloging assets. You've made your bed, literally and figuratively. Married to a man you barely know, combining households with 4 children, all to spite me and prove some point about independence. Vivienne's voice stayed level. I married Tristan because I love him. The timing was strategic, but the feeling is real. Love. Margaret invested the word with contempt. You loved Preston too. That worked out splendidly. Tristan descended the stairs, having thrown on clothes, and left Bennett to supervise the children. He positioned himself beside Vivienne, united front against the elegant predator invading their space. Margaret turned her attention to him, eyes cataloging his morning dishevelment with undisguised disdain. Mr. Walker, or should I say Mr. Sterling Walker, do you plan to take my daughter's name professionally as well as personally? The barb landed, but Tristan didn't flinch. I plan to support my wife and help raise 4 incredible children. What I'm called while doing it seems irrelevant. How noble. Margaret's smile could have cut glass. Tell me, did you sign a prenuptial agreement? Silence stretched. They hadn't. 72 hours between proposal and wedding hadn't allowed time for lawyers and negotiations and asset protection. Margaret's expression shifted to something almost pitying. Of course you didn't, which means you now have legal claim to half of everything Vivienne owns. Her apartment, her trust fund, her future inheritance. Quite a windfall for a struggling architect with 3 mouths to feed. Vivienne stepped forward. Get out, now. But Margaret wasn't finished. I came to make you an offer. Both of you. A generous offer that solves everyone's problems. She opened her handbag, withdrawing an envelope thick with paper. She set it on the marble counter with the delicacy of someone handling explosives. Her voice carried boardroom authority. Annulment papers, already prepared. Sign these, file them before the 30-day evaluation period ends, and I will ensure Preston's custody suit disappears. I will also transfer $2 million into a trust for Grayson's care and provide Mr. Walker with a substantial settlement for his cooperation. The number hung in air like a bribe and a threat. $2 million. More money than Tristan would earn in a lifetime of designing buildings. Enough to secure his daughter's futures, pay for college, eliminate every financial stress that had haunted him since Catherine died. All he had to do was walk away from a marriage barely 12 hours old. Vivienne's voice came dangerous. You're trying to buy him off, just like you bought Preston's cooperation. Margaret didn't deny it. I'm trying to protect my daughter and grandson from a mistake that will haunt them for years. Mr. Walker seems like a decent man. Decent men sometimes make poor decisions when desperation clouds judgment. I'm offering him a way out that preserves everyone's dignity. She turned to Tristan. $2 million. You could give your daughters everything you've sacrificed to provide. Private schools, college funds, medical care if they need it. A house that doesn't require you to work 70-hour weeks to afford. All you have to do is admit this marriage was a strategic error and walk away cleanly. The temptation clawed at Tristan's resolve. He'd spent 6 years making impossible choices between his children's needs and his own survival. $2 million would eliminate those choices, would let him be the father he'd always wanted to be instead of the one constantly scrambling to keep everyone fed and housed. He looked at Vivienne, saw fear in her expression. Not fear that he'd take the money, but fear that he should. That turning down Margaret's offer would condemn his daughters to continued struggle when better options existed. Her voice came soft. You should consider it. Really consider it. That money could change your life. Quinn appeared at the top of the stairs, still in her pajamas. Daddy, what's going on? Harper and Blair followed the 3 of them, clustering together with the instinct of siblings who'd learned that adult conversations often determined their fates. Grayson emerged from his room, headphones already in place against the tension vibrating through the apartment. 4 children watching. 4 futures hanging on whatever decision Tristan made in the next few moments. He picked up the envelope, feeling the weight of legal dissolution and financial salvation. Opened it enough to see the official seal, the places marked for signatures. Then he walked to the kitchen sink and turned on the disposal. Tore the papers methodically into strips, feeding them to the grinding mechanism until nothing remained but pulp and broken promises. His voice came steady. "I don't want your money, Mrs. Sterling. I want my wife. I want to build a family with someone who sees my daughters as assets instead of liabilities, and I want you to leave our home before I call security." Margaret's composure cracked for the first time, rage breaking through aristocratic control. "You're a fool, both of you. This marriage won't survive the month. The evaluation will show exactly what I already know, that you're playing house with other people's children and pretending desperation equals love." Vivienne moved to the door, opening it with deliberate courtesy. "Goodbye, Mother. Don't come back unless you're invited." Margaret gathered her handbag and her dignity, sweeping toward the exit with the posture of someone who'd lost a battle but not the war. She paused in the doorway, final shot delivered with surgical precision. "The evaluator arrives tomorrow. I wonder what she'll think of a household where the children witness their grandmother being thrown out. Doesn't seem very stable." Then she was gone, heels clicking down the hallway, leaving behind the stink of burned bridges and manufactured consequences. The apartment fell into silence, broken only by the disposal's mechanical grind finishing its work. Tristan stood at the sink, hands shaking with adrenaline and the magnitude of what he'd just refused. Vivienne approached slowly. "You shouldn't have done that." He turned to face her. "Done what? Refused to let your mother buy me like Preston. Refused $2 million that could have secured your daughter's futures." Her voice carried guilt and gratitude in equal measure. "I would have understood. Hell, I would have encouraged it. That money means nothing if I have to teach my girls that love is transactional." Tristan gestured at Harper, Quinn, and Blair, still watching from the stairs. "They've already learned that adults lie, that promises break, that people leave when things get complicated. I won't teach them that commitment has a price tag." Grayson's quiet voice cut through the tension. "Mathematically, Mr. Tristan made the correct choice. $2 million divided by 6 people over estimated 70 remaining years equals approximately $47,000 per person annually. But family provides non-quantifiable value that exceeds monetary calculation." The adults stared at the 8-year-old who'd just reduced Margaret Sterling's bribe to arithmetic and found it insufficient. Vivienne started laughing, slightly hysterical but genuine. "Did my son just use math to justify turning down $2 million? Harper descended the stairs with her sisters. "He's right, though. We don't need money. We need people who stay." That simple statement, delivered with the conviction of someone who'd survived 17 rejections, shattered what remained of Tristan's composure. He gathered all 3 girls close, burying his face in their hair. The family services evaluator arrived later that morning with a clipboard, a professional smile, and eyes that missed nothing. Her name was Dr. Patricia Morrison, clinical psychologist specializing in family dynamics and custody assessments. She spent 3 hours conducting interviews, observing interactions, reviewing the living arrangements with the thoroughness of someone whose report would determine a child's future. She spoke with each child separately, questioned both adults about their relationship timeline, their parenting philosophies, their plans for combining households permanently, examined the bedroom arrangements, the school schedules, the division of responsibilities. Tristan answered honestly, knowing that lies would show in body language and verbal hesitation. Yes, the marriage was recent. Yes, they were still figuring out logistics. Yes, combining 4 children came with challenges. But he also talked about Harper teaching Grayson social cues, about Quinn's fearless acceptance of differences, about Blair and Grayson's quiet companionship built on shared observation rather than constant noise. Vivienne described cutting back her work hours, rearranging her schedule to be present for school pickups and homework help, showed the family calendar color-coded by child and activity, detailed the therapy appointments, the IEP meetings, the ordinary chaos of raising kids who needed extra attention. Dr. Morrison took notes without commentary. Professional neutrality maintained throughout. She scheduled follow-up visits over the next 3 weeks, wanting to observe the household at different times and under various stressors. After she left, Tristan and Vivienne collapsed on the couch, emotionally exhausted. His voice came quiet. "That went better than expected." Vivienne's laugh held an edge. Or worse, hard to tell with evaluators. They're trained to show nothing. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of supervised normalcy. Dr. Morrison appeared at unpredictable intervals, observing breakfast routines and bedtime rituals and weekend activities. She interviewed teachers, therapists, neighbors, built a comprehensive picture of their hastily assembled family. They went to the park on Saturdays, all 6 of them navigating playground politics and sibling disputes under professional observation. They attended Grayson's occupational therapy sessions and the triplets' parent-teacher conferences. They ate dinner together every night, conversations sometimes flowing easily and sometimes stilted by the awareness that everything counted. Preston made himself scarce after Bennett filed motions revealing his financial desperation. His lawyers withdrew the custody petition without formal explanation, though everyone understood Margaret's promised support had evaporated when she failed to break up the marriage. But Margaret herself remained a presence, texting Vivienne daily with criticism disguised as concern, showing up unannounced to drop off gifts for Grayson that came with implicit judgment about Vivienne's choices. Making sure everyone knew she hadn't surrendered, merely regrouped. The final evaluation session arrived on a gray November morning, rain drumming against penthouse windows. Dr. Morrison sat across from Tristan, and Vivienne file folder thick with observations and assessments. Her expression remained professionally neutral. "I've completed my evaluation. My report will be filed with the court this afternoon." Vivienne's hand found Tristan's grip tight enough to hurt, and Dr. Morrison allowed herself a small smile. "I'm recommending the custody petition be permanently dismissed and that Grayson remain in his mother's primary care." Relief flooded Tristan's system, but Dr. Morrison wasn't finished. "However, I have concerns I need to address." The relief curdled into anxiety. Vivienne's grip tightened further. The psychologist opened her file. "Your marriage is unconventional. The timeline raises questions about motivations. Combining 4 children from broken homes creates complex dynamics that will require ongoing professional support." She met their eyes directly. "But I've also observed genuine affection between all family members. I've seen Grayson make more progress in 3 weeks than his previous reports show in 6 months. I've watched 3 little girls who've learned to expect rejection slowly begin to trust that this time might be different." Her voice softened almost imperceptibly. "You're not a conventional family. You're probably not even a stable family yet. But you're a family that's fighting to become functional, and that counts for more than perfect stability built on sand." She closed the file with finality. "My recommendation is that you continue family therapy, that you maintain the adjusted work schedule, that you give these children consistency even when it's inconvenient. Do that, and I believe you'll succeed where many traditional families fail." Vivienne's tears fell without shame. "Thank you. We'll do everything you recommended." Dr. Morrison stood, gathering her materials. "I know you will. I've seen what you're willing to sacrifice for these children. That dedication doesn't guarantee success, but it gives you better odds than most." The court hearing 3 days later was anticlimactic after weeks of stress. Judge Hendricks reviewed Dr. Morrison's report, questioned both parties about their understanding of the psychologist's recommendations, then ruled that Grayson would remain in Vivienne's sole custody with Preston, granted supervised visitation rights twice monthly. Preston accepted the ruling with visible relief, probably understanding he'd dodged legal consequences for his transparent manipulation. Margaret attended but said nothing, her silence more ominous than her previous interference. Margaret's next move came 2 weeks later, delivered through lawyers rather than personal confrontation. She filed a petition for grandparental visitation rights, claiming she'd been systematically denied access to her grandson by Vivienne's vindictive behavior. The petition was legally sound, properly filed, and completely devastating in its implications. Another court battle, more evaluations, continued instability for Grayson just as he'd begun to settle. Vivienne read the documents in numb silence, then handed them to Tristan without comment. He scanned the legal language, feeling fury build with each paragraph of manufactured concern. His voice came tight. She won't stop. Ever. This is her way of maintaining control. She's his grandmother. Vivienne's professional mask had returned, emotions locked behind corporate armor. The court generally favors family connection. She'll probably get visitation rights. Tristan saw the defeat in her posture, the bone-deep exhaustion of someone who'd been fighting for too long. He made a decision that would either save their family or destroy it. He called Margaret Sterling, directly using the number she'd left during her last unwanted visit. She answered on the third-ring voice, carrying smug satisfaction. "Mr. Walker, I wondered how long before you'd reach out." His words came without preamble. "What do you want? Really want? Not the legal maneuvering or power plays. What would make you stop attacking your daughter?" Silence stretched across the connection. When Margaret spoke again, some of the aristocratic Polish had worn thin. "I want to know my grandson won't be abandoned when this marriage inevitably fails. I want assurance that when you leave, because men like you always leave, Grayson won't be collateral damage." The assessment stung because it contained a kernel of fear Tristan himself harbored. What if he couldn't make this work? What if his track record of failed relationships predicted this one's eventual collapse? But he'd learned something in 3 months of loving Vivienne and her complicated son. Fear was just another obstacle to navigate, not a prophecy of inevitable doom. His voice came steady. "I'm not leaving, not because this is easy or comfortable or what I planned, but because these 6 people are my family now, and families don't discard members when things get hard." Margaret's laugh carried bitter understanding. "You say that now. Wait until the reality sets in, until the financial strain of 4 children overwhelms your romantic notions, until you realize my daughter's world and yours don't actually overlap." "You're right." Tristan's admission seemed to surprise her into silence. "Our worlds are different. I'll never have your money or social standing. I'll always be the struggling architect who married into a family that exceeds my economic class." He paused, letting that truth settle. "But I can give Grayson and my daughters something wealth can't buy. I can show up, every day, even when it's hard, even when it would be easier to leave. I can prove that love isn't transactional, that commitment isn't conditional, that families are built through showing up rather than showing off." More silence. Tristan pressed his advantage. "So here's my offer. You drop the visitation petition. You stop trying to break up this marriage. And in return you get something you haven't had in 3 years. Margaret's voice came wary. "Which is access to your grandson. Real access, not court-mandated visits supervised by hostile parents. We'll include you in family events. Let you build a relationship with Grayson on terms that don't involve lawyers and judges. But only if you stop treating your daughter like she's incapable of making her own choices." The proposal hung between them, risky and potentially naive. Giving Margaret access could backfire spectacularly if she used it to continue her manipulation. But Tristan had watched Grayson's face when Vivienne mentioned her mother, had seen the longing for connection that children felt even toward difficult family members. Cutting Margaret out completely might win the legal battle while losing something more important. Margaret's response came slowly. "You'd give me that? After everything I've done?" "I'd give Grayson that," Tristan corrected gently. "He deserves to know his grandmother, and you deserve to know your grandson. But it has to be real connection, not power struggle." "And if I refuse? If I proceed with the petition?" Tristan's voice hardened. "Then we fight you in court. And we win, because Dr. Morrison's report makes it clear that this family is functional. You lose access entirely, and Grayson grows up knowing his grandmother chose control over relationship." The stakes were laid bare. Margaret could accept partnership or lose everything. Her answer came after a pause that felt eternal. "I need time to consider. You have 48 hours." Tristan ended the call before she could negotiate terms. Vivienne had been listening from the doorway, eyes wide. "You just gambled our stability on my mother's better nature, assuming she has one." He pulled her close. "I gambled on her loving Grayson more than she hates losing control. There's a difference. Margaret's response arrived via email 36 hours later. Brief, formal, but containing the words Tristan had hoped for. I accept your terms. My lawyer will withdraw the petition this afternoon. The relief was immense, but incomplete. They'd won this battle, but the war with Margaret Sterling's need for control would probably never fully end. She'd agreed to truce, not surrender. But truces could become peace if maintained long enough. And maybe that was enough. 6 months after that first chocolate milk dinner at Marcello's, they gathered again at the same restaurant. The entire family had requested it, wanting to mark the anniversary of the night that changed 6 lives. Margaret Sterling joined them, integration still fragile but progressing. The hostess seated them at the same table, recognition lighting her features as she accommodated 3 booster seats and 1 8-year-old who still preferred the security of structured seating. The waiter approached with menus and the comfortable familiarity of someone who'd served them multiple times. Let me guess, 6 chocolate milks. Quinn's voice rang with authority. Yes, please. It's our tradition. Margaret sat beside Grayson. Her interaction with him more natural now, after months of supervised visits that had gradually become genuine connection. She'd learned to respect his need for patterns and quiet. He'd learned that grandmothers could be safe people if given clear boundaries. The evening unfolded with the comfortable chaos of family dinners everywhere. Children talked over each other. Adults negotiated food preferences and dietary requirements. Stories were shared inside jokes, referenced memories built in real time. Grayson announced with characteristic precision, "It's been 183 days since the first chocolate milk dinner. Statistical analysis suggests this family configuration has achieved stability." Harper leaned over. "Gray, you can just say you're happy." The boy considered this, then amended, "I'm happy. Statistical analysis confirms it." Laughter rippled around the table, genuine and unforced. Margaret smiled despite herself, barriers continuing their slow dissolution. Tristan watched his daughters interact with Grayson, saw Vivienne's hand resting comfortably on his knee, observed Margaret making genuine effort to connect, rather than control. This messy, imperfect family that nobody could have predicted. The check arrived, and they split it equally. Now compromise reached through months of negotiating how to blend radically different economic realities. Outside, November's chill had deepened into early winter, but inside, Marcello's warmth lingered. They walked to their cars together, Margaret making her goodbyes with promises to see Grayson on Tuesday for their scheduled afternoon together. She paused before leaving, directing words to Tristan. "You were right. About showing up mattering more than having all the answers. Took me 6 months to admit it, but you were right." It was the closest she'd come to apology, and Tristan accepted it for what it represented, progress, however grudging. The drive home passed in comfortable silence. 3 girls in back seats fighting sleep and losing. Tristan carried them up to the penthouse one by one, tucking them into beds that had become theirs through accumulated nights rather than formal claim. Vivienne performed the same ritual, with Grayson navigating his bedtime routine with the expertise of someone who'd learned through trial and error what worked and what triggered meltdown. Later, they collapsed into their own bed, exhausted and content in ways that felt earned rather than accidental. Vivienne's voice came sleepy. "We made it. 6 months." Tristan pulled her closer. "We survived it. Now we learn to thrive." She tilted her head to look at him. "What's the secret to making this work when it shouldn't?" He considered the question, thinking back over 6 months of struggles and victories and ordinary moments that had somehow accumulated into family. His answer came from hard-won understanding. There's no secret. Just showing up every day. Choosing each other even when it's inconvenient. Believing that love is action rather than feeling. That commitment means fighting for something worth having, even when, especially when it's hard. Vivienne kissed him, slow and deep and full of promise. "Then we keep showing up." "Every day," Tristan agreed, "for as long as we all shall live." The next morning arrived with familiar chaos. Alarm clocks and breakfast negotiations and the careful choreography of getting 4 children ready for school. Tristan stood at the stove making eggs to 3 different specifications, while Vivienne packed lunches and Grayson calculated optimal backpack weight distribution. Harper appeared at his elbow. "Daddy, Quinn took my hairbrush again." Quinn's voice floated from the bathroom. "I needed it. Mine has missing bristles." Blair's quiet addition. "You broke hers last week." Normal sibling chaos. The kind he'd feared would overwhelm them, but instead had become the soundtrack of daily existence. Vivienne caught his eye across the kitchen, smile playing at corners of her mouth. She mouthed words he'd become practiced at reading, "This is insane." He mouthed back, "Best insanity ever." Because this was his life now. These were his people. Not the life he'd planned or the family he'd imagined, but somehow better for being chosen rather than assigned. 18 hadn't been the lucky number because it was different from the previous 17. It was lucky because they'd all chosen to fight for it. Because broken people had built functional family from collective wreckage. Because love proved to be choice and action and showing up, every single day. For as long as they all shall live.